We're just going to start by saying the Hebrew name, the full Hebrew name. My father was very makbid that when you speak about somebody, you're supposed to say the full Hebrew name. So anything I say should be in the merit of the neshama of Reb Yisroel ben Reb Chaim. Each one has one name. Confirmation, one name. I'll turn to you for confirmation. I tried. Each one has one name?
Yes.
So you have to keep in mind the name Reb Yisroel ben Reb Chaim. There's something that my father Zatzal said, and I just spoke to my mother to make sure that I understood the profundity of how he said it. In Kohelet, Shlomo HaMelech enumerates about 30 itim, 30 times. Almost all of them have a lamed. Eis la ledes, eis lamos. One of the rare exceptions is the word sipoid. Sipoid is from the word hesped, meaning to mourn. It doesn't say eis lispoid, it says eis sipoid. There's no lamed. So my father said the reason is, if there were a lamed, that word would mean eis lispoid. There's a time to mourn. That happens a lot. There are times to mourn. Bad things happen, it's a time to mourn. But then there's another level where you don't have that letter lamed, and instead of the word being eis lispoid, it's eis sipoid. That doesn't mean it's a time to mourn. It means time is mourning. And if you heard the two half sentences I just said, there's a ginormous difference between the two. A lot of sad things happen in life, and it's eis lispoid, a time to mourn. Now's a time to mourn. Then once in a while, there are events that you hear about that are not a time to mourn, but eis sipoid. Time is mourning. Time is standing still and mourning. The world is mourning. The entirety of time is mourning. That has nothing to do with the time to mourn. So when I was thinking about speaking for a few minutes about Yisroel following the two speakers that we just heard, I realized coming together tonight in the shul for a Shloshim for Reb Yisroel ben Reb Chaim is not eis lispoid. If you think it's a time to mourn, you missed it. It's eis sipoid. Time itself is mourning. Because when someone who is in his mid-30s with a young wife and two kinderlach passes away so suddenly, when someone who is probably from the biggest ben aliyah, which means that he went from one level to a meteoric rise, like probably beyond anyone we've met in our lifetime, that's a pretty fair statement for us to make. It's not a time to mourn. Time is mourning, period. Rabbi Friedberg spoke so eloquently, I was moved to a different place. Rabbi Friedberg said that Yehudit Meira and the family wants to make sure this legend is not forgotten. So does the Panav Yisroel. Because in the famous words, the Panav Yisroel was once asked the following question. There's a custom that when you go to a funeral, you're supposed to enter the funeral. Imagine there's a door here and a door there. You're supposed to enter one way and leave a different path. It's a strong custom. It's almost a law. So somebody asked the Panav Yisroel, why? Why is it so important that you enter one way but leave a different path? So the Panav Yisroel, using a play on words, answered poignantly, because how could any Jew go to a funeral, enter a funeral, and leave the same way? It's not possible. if you leave the same way, you weren't there. Of course, the man's question was about the physical entering and leaving, but the Panav Yisroel just answered spot on. Can you go to a funeral and leave the same way? A person can come to the Shloshim for Rabbi Yisroel ben Reb Chaim and not take something upon themselves? So in answer to the question that Rabbi Freiberg said so eloquently, that Yehudit Mihira wanted to make sure that Rabbi Yisroel, who was a giant in being a Ben Aliyah, and as Rabbi Singer said, there are many, many times he spent Shabbos in my home, and we loved having him. Part of the reason we had him wasn't because he wanted to eat by me. A large amount of the reason we had him was because we loved having him. Because I know he wanted to eat by us, and my kids were talking about it. We knew exactly where he sat, first with the chains, and then with the white shirt, and through the whole thing, and we loved him. There are some people that you want at your table because you like them. We wanted him in our home for Shabbos because we got more chizuk from him than vice versa. So if anybody came here tonight, the Panav Yisroel would tell you, don't leave the same. There are three things that Moshe Rabbeinu said he didn't understand. They were difficult for him to understand what they were, so God showed them to him. 3 times Rashi says, since it was hard, Hashem showed it to him. What were the 3 things? One was the menorah, one was the coin, which is called the shekel, and one was the moon, which in Hebrew is called hachodesh, the moon. What's the first letter of those 3 words? The menorah is a mem, shekel is a shin, and hachodesh is a hey. You put those 3 letters together, mem, shin, hey, it spells his name. A person's name is not from the things that come easy to them. The things that come easy to you and are second nature, that's not who you are. It's cute, but it's not who you are. Your essence is by how you do with things that are difficult and what you make of yourself. Moshe Rabbeinu could have been given any name. His name, Mem Shin Hey, stood for Menorah Shekel HaChodesh, because you are who you are by how you do with difficulties. Yisroel faced certain difficulties. You heard from Rabbi Singer so eloquently that after going to the Skar Rebbe, he said, now I'm going to go ahead and move forward. And he became probably, as I said a few minutes ago, the single biggest Ben Aliyah who went from one extreme to another, probably more than anybody we've ever met. Your name tells you everything about you. It's not from the things that are easy. The easy things are fluff. Moshe Rabbeinu's name, Menorah Shekel and HaChodesh, is because things that are hard show who you are and who you aren't. And he, Rabbi Yisroel ben Reb Chaim, was the real deal. His name was Yisroel. You heard Rabbi Stinger speak so beautifully that everything he did was with passion and fire and passion and fire and passion and fire. And everybody knows that in the name Yisroel, the 2 middle letters, that would be the second letter is a shin, and the 4th letter is an aleph. The 2 middle letters, shin and aleph, spells the word eish. So here we are talking about someone whose whole life was such a fire and such a bren, and he really did things with an unparalleled passion, because that's what we just learned from Moshe. His name was Yisroel, and the center of the name Yisroel is eish, and eish is who he was. Because he was real. There's somebody who was disturbed by a dream. I'm not telling you anything that's a chiddush, it's famous. In his dream, which was actually reoccurring, there was a man in his 90s who went to heaven, and the angels got together and said, let's greet a little boy. And there was a young man who died, and the angels got together and said, let's greet an old man. And he had this reoccurring dream, and it bothered him. What? A man in his 90s is a little boy? And a young man is old? What's going on over here? So he went to his Rebbe for clarification, and the Rebbe explained that I know I'm not telling you anything new. I know we know the story. But how applicable is it here? So the Rebbe explained, you see, in Shemayim, when the angels gather to greet people, They don't greet the people based on their age. When a 95-year-old man dies, they don't say, here's a 95-year-old man. How productive were you? How'd you spend your time? How much did you get done? How accomplished were you? If a man is 95, but has very little to show for it, and didn't aspire or achieve or accomplish much, then when angels get together, they say, let's welcome in a little boy. But if a young man goes to heaven, the Rav told this person, but every minute of every day was quality and quantity and accomplished and inspiring and waxing and steiging with a bren and a passion, then although he was young in years, they welcome a very old man. That's the way it works in Shemayim, apparently. For anybody who knew Rabbi Yisroel ben Reb Chaim, it would be fair to say that the last many years, as Rabbi Singer said, when he said, all right, now it's time, we're moving on, he accomplished so much. Bein Adam lamakom and Bein Adam lachaveiro, as per the story about taking out the garbage. And yeah, he did have a fabulous smile. He came here a couple months ago, saw me all the time in shul, and told me about his progress and his update. I would imagine, based on the story I just told you a minute ago, that when he, at the young age, was nifter a month ago, the Rebbeinu Shalom and his angel said, let's go, because we're welcoming an extremely old man. How many of us can say that? You want to do something for the Almana? You want to make sure that Yehudit Meira, who said, I don't want this legend to be forgotten. So you know what you do? You make sure, like the Panavish Rav says, you leave differently than you came in about 62 minutes ago. You make sure that everybody on their own level aspires and grows and tries and does something that is so meaningful that it will make us, at whatever age we are, the Rebbeinu Shalom will say, you're accomplishing. It doesn't come from the things that are easy. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get his name, and Rabbi Yisroel Chervony didn't get his name from things that are easy. I just want to tell you one more thing, and then I'll end with a story. I think when Rabbi Friedberg said that the family, and I am referring to Yisroel's father, brother, wife, and kinderlach, want to make sure he's not forgotten, the following thought came to my mind, which perhaps may be the most powerful answer to what Rabbi Friedberg said. When Haman threw a lottery to destroy the Jews, it came out in Adar. The Gemara Yud Gimel Amud Beis says he was thrilled, Simcha Gedola, like a ginormous joy. You know why? Because that was the month Moshe Rabbeinu died. So if it was a month Moshe Rabbeinu died, then obviously it's unlucky for the Jews. A month that's unlucky for the Jews, is there a better time to kill them all? So the Gemara says, Haman, what are you, a fool? Bezayin ba'adar meis, u bezayin ba'adar noilad. You're right, it's the day he died, but it was also the day he was born. 120 years earlier, he's born on that day. So it's not such a bad day, it was the day he was born too. The question is obvious. I believe it's from the Ger Rebbe. He says, what? The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on that day doesn't make it a happy day. Did Moshe Rabbeinu die on that day? The answer is only one thing, yes. If he died on that day, it's bad. And if he died on that day, it's unlucky. And a bad, unlucky day is a good day to destroy the Jews, period. So what in the world does the Gemara mean? On 7 of Adar he died, and on 7 of Adar he was born, and therefore what? It all of a sudden became a happy day? Now it's a good day? It's still a bad, ominous, unlucky day, period. So the Ger Rebbe says, you don't know what the Gemara means. When the Gemara says that on the 7th of Adar he died, on the 7th of Adar he was born, listen to this, because it might be one of the most scintillating things you ever heard in your life. The Gemara does not mean that on the 7th of Adar he died, and on the 7th of Adar he was born, meaning 120 years earlier. That's true, but it's not what the Gemara means, because the fact that he was born 120 years earlier doesn't offset it and make it a lucky day. The Gemara means, Haman, you're a fool, because you in your life think that people live to eat, drink, be merry, be happy, then they die, and that's it. But you don't realize that the way it works by a Yid is entirely different. When a Yid passes away, he is not dying. The Yid who died in many new ways, Noilad, is born again. And therefore, the Ger Rebbe says the correct way to read the Gemara is like this. When the Gemara says Moshe was born, it doesn't mean 120 years earlier. It means on the 7th of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu died. But on the 7th of Adar, that day, Moshe Rabbeinu was born. Not earlier. The day Moshe died, Moshe was born. So Haman, you're a fool. You think it's unlucky, ominous, and bad? B'zayin ba'adar meisu, b'zayin ba'adar noila. That day of Misa is also a day of Leda. So the answer to Rabbi Freiberg's question is, if Yehudit Me'ira, and Yisroel's father and brother and family, and especially two Kinderlach who didn't even have a chance to appreciate everything about their father, want to make sure that the day of Misa is not a day of Misa, then you better leave here today making sure that 30 days ago, Ba'oisa Yom Shemes, Reb Yisroel ben Reb Chaim, Noilad, Reb Yisroel ben Reb Chaim. That's it. We're not here to say words that are warm and fuzzy. We're here to say it straight. You better make sure that the day that he was nifter is a day, as Rabbi Singer, I believe, said, Rabbi Freiberg, I think, said, about the midos, that when a person dies, their midos don't die, you take them and you grab them and you run with them. That struck me very strongly. Yisroel had a lot of midos. Everybody get together. You take one, and you take one, and you take one, and let her take one. But you better make sure that 30 days ago, Ba'oisa Yom Shemes Reb Yisroel, Ben Reb Chaim, Ba'oisa Yom Shemes Noilad. You better make sure it was the day that he was born. And the way to make sure that he was born is by taking these midos and doing something. I imagine that would give some small measure of nechama to Yehudit. And one day we'll meet the children and we'll tell them. I want to end with a maisa. There was a man whose son became religious by going to a kiruv yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. When he came back fully observant, his father wasn't religious. The father said, I want you to teach me some Gemara. So he said to his father, Gemara is like a deep analytical study. He said, doesn't make a difference. I want you to teach me Gemara. So he sits down with his father and he teaches in Gemara. They learn a couple times a week. And they learn for about a year. So that means if you make a calculation, let's say they learned about 3-4 hours a week times 50 plus a week, they learned about 200 hours. In 200 hours, the father who wasn't religious and the son who became a Baal Tshuva learned one daf of Gemara. One daf means one page, 2 sides. Today, people who learn Daf Yomi, it used to be they learned Daf Yomi in an hour. A few years ago, they started doing the Daf in 45 minutes. And today, many people do the Daf from their front door to the time they get in their car. And that's when their car is parked close. I think there are tapes that say, do a Daf in 2 minutes. And it took the man 200 hours to learn a Daf. He finishes the Daf, and he says to his son, I'm ready for the party. He says, what party do you mean? He says, like the Siyum, the Siyum, the big party? He says, yeah, I want one of those. He said, we do that for a Masechta, a whole portfolio, a whole book. Not a page. He doesn't know what to do. So he goes to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and he says to Rav Moshe, my father wants me to make a Siyum. I learned with him a page. What should I do? You look and say, for Nachlasi, our Pinter brings us down. He says, what do you mean, what should you do? Make him a Siyum. And I'm coming to the Siyum. That night was a siyum that probably the angels enjoyed dancing and rejoicing as well, and Ramosha Feinstein was there. It was a siyum on a daf. That night, the father who just made a siyum went to bed, and in the morning he didn't wake up. He died in his sleep. Bad news travels, and Ramosha found out that last night he was at a siyum for the man, and now he has to go to the levaya. Ramosha comes to the levaya, and he got up to speak, and this is what Ramosha said about the man who the night before made a siyum on a daf and who now is not alive. Yesh koine olamai b'shah achas, that's a quote from the Gemara. Yesh koine olamai b'shah achas, and then Ramosha added, Yesh koine olamai b'daf achas. Some people can acquire their entire world and existence in one daf. And this man said, Reb Moshe, who the night before made a siyum on a daf, acquired his olam haba because yesh koine olamai b'daf achas. He was a ben olam haba with that one daf, and for that. Reb Yisroel, over the last 10 or so years, acquired tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of dafim. In case you think the word that just came out of my mouth was exaggeratory, you didn't know him. Because when I speak about his acquiring dafim, I don't only mean how many pages of Gemara he knew, and his Tehillim, and his Shnai Mikra Targum, and his Taimer Devaira. I mean things like taking out the garbage. I mean things like smiling. Those are dafim. And in a couple of years, he acquired tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of dafim. It's up to us to grab some of those dafim. He became a ben olam haba with his dafim, and for Yehudit, the children, Yisrael's father and brother and extended family, we better make sure we grab some of those dafim. Don't have come tonight to a Shloshim and not grab dafim, not grab midas, and make sure to leave a different person than we enter. We don't know why the Rebbeinu Shalom took away such a, in our eyes, a young person. We don't know. I think Rabbi Friedberg says we say animam and not animevin. But one thing we do know, to make sure that this legend is never forgotten, and to make sure that the person is probably one of the biggest B'nai Aliyah we ever were privileged to meet in our life, you better make sure he accomplished tens upon tens of thousands of dafim and midas. Grab some of them. Grab more than one. Take a whole package. Learn more about him from Rabbi Singer. Learn more about him from Rabbi Friedberg. And say, you know what? I'm going to start doing that. And in that merit, let all of the dafim and all of the midas and everything that we grab be lezecher uleilei nishmas, his precious neshama. We're asking that he should please go to Hashem and ask the Rebbeinu Shalom. He davened unbelievably. You saw him daven. Let him ask the Rebbeinu Shalom as he davens in Shemayim that he should answer the tefillas for Yehudit, his two children, his father, brother, and extended family. And they should ask the Rebbeinu Shalom to bring the Geula Shalema here and now, b'mheir and b'yameinu.